we are actually nearing to one of our last fireside chats. We have actually 2 more fireside chats for you, both very interesting. But I need to say that please plan in and stay with us and with the fellow audience, speakers, sponsors, and partners for after the last fireside chat for an apéro in the backside. There'll be food, there'll be drinks, and also we can also go out to the terrace where the weather is still beautiful. So really kudos to you to actually making it still and staying in here for the content. So with no further ado, I would like to announce the next fireside chat. The title is Transforming Banking with DLT, Unlocking Innovation, Mitigating Risk, and Staying Ahead of Cyber Threats. So we brought 2 experts for you to discuss this on stage in front of you. One of them, so the fireside chat moderator is Markus Perdrizat. Welcome on stage. He will introduce himself in detail. And his partner in crime on stage will be Halborn CEO Jacques Boschung. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Benedict. It's good to be here tonight. Can you all hear me? All right, perfect. Today, I'm here with Jacques. Welcome, Jacques. So we both got started in IT infrastructure many moons ago, but while my career was pretty straightforward, I did databases, distributed databases in IT infrastructure, and now I do decentralized databases in crypto financial infrastructure. Your career took a few more turns, Jacques. Please tell me, how does a PC salesman become CEO of a cybersecurity company?
And of course, we did not prepare that question, right? So I spent indeed 20-something years in the classical IT infrastructure business with companies like IBM, HP, you're referring to, and Dell Technologies. And then I moved to the cybersecurity part of it. And then from cybersecurity to Web3, crypto, and this new world, this new realm of cybersecurity, the step is easier. So that's how it came. So I am really from the data center side of the equation, but you can bring a lot of the ingredients of the traditional cybersecurity into that space, especially now, and that's the topic of today, since we have this big convergence happening, this convergence between Web3 and traditional banking, between DeFi and TradFi. And that's where I would claim that company like mine, but also people like me, are quite useful.
Yeah, we see there are waves in technology, in emerging technology, and thinking back in 2019, when we saw a wave of crypto entering into traditional financial services, I was leading PwC's Blockchain Competence Center at that time, and I felt it was very urgent to step up our smart contract audit capabilities. So we purchased an audit firm, Chain Security, at that time. Only a few months, years later to realize, well, it wasn't the right time yet. And coincidentally, there's a similar story in your back when Kudelski was building up a blockchain competence center. And when you took that over, I understand you had to de-emphasize the team as well.
Yeah, so what you're speaking about is this winter and summer of technologies that we may be happening as well with AI. Let's see. So yes, indeed, but it's a question of focus. So that company, I was a CEO at that time, so that was a traditional cybersecurity perimeter. If you don't have the critical mass, you cannot be successful. And we were competing against companies like Halborn, so it was hard.
Now it's Halborn. And banks, they see an upcoming wave of crypto. They see lots of opportunities. They want to be innovative and go into this emerging technology, this emerging financial service space, but they also see the risks. And what do you tell them? How can they balance that innovation with the risk?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. So first, I would say that the regulatory framework we are in today, for instance with DORA, about resilience of digital infrastructure, is a good indication. When you look at DORA, what do you need to do? You need first to have an ICT risk framework. Second, what you need to do, you need to report to the authority any incident. Third, you absolutely need also to make testing of that critical infrastructure, of the critical systems. Fourth, you need to assess your third party. And fifth, you need to be part of that community. So imagine if you are a bank, you have to do all that for the Web 2 perimeters, and all of a sudden, you add to that the Web 3. If you are a large bank, I can mention them because they are public. If you're a large bank like UBS, they have decided to do everything which is chain-related on public chain, on the mainnet of Ethereum. So suddenly, you have smart contracts sitting there, and you have your classical perimeters, but there is a lot of interaction. You are, for instance, issuing security on-chain, but then you make the settlement thanks to stablecoin on that same chain. At the same time, you have to do custody. So it's a blend of Web 2 and Web 3. So you absolutely need to have an approach where you pick the right partners who are able to support you in that journey. So if we speak about DORA, you need to have partners who have this level of accreditation and certification. But you also need to have a secure by design approach, meaning that in everything you do, in your development life cycle, security is always in. You don't want to be the next Bybit of the history of crypto.
Nobody wants to be the next Bybit. 1.4 billion hacked just about 4 or 5 weeks ago. But when you put it that way, I mean, that's traditional cybersecurity, a new acronym, DORA, but sounds it's pretty much the same thing that they do in traditional systems and Web3. Isn't there a bit more to it?
No, there is much more. So DORA is indeed a traditional framework, very similar to NIST or SOC 2 Type 2. For instance, we are SOC 2 Type 2, which is really a badge of honor, I would call that, with regard to cybersecurity. But what I am saying is that you have to take that framework because if you are a financial institution in Europe, you are forced. You need to adopt DORA, and you add the ingredient of Web3. And that's when it comes, that's when the shit hits the fan, if you see what I mean. So that's when the level of complexity is such that in many cases that we are faced with, we see the traditional cybersecurity team of the banks being overwhelmed by that. Because in a traditional perimeter, Web 2, when you have an incident, you have multiple hours to react. On-chain, you have minutes, sometimes seconds, and that's really the Bybit example I was making. So you need to have a different approach when you think about resilience and when you think about threat modeling and how do you deal with those threats. So you need to combine both of them.
Bybit has shown that you might not even have seconds because when a transaction is signed and available on the blockchain, it's out there, you don't know where it goes, and soon it will be in North Korean control sitting in a Bitcoin somewhere. How do banks deal with that major change? Because, I mean, today when somebody makes a fat finger mistake and accidentally wires $1 billion to Bangladesh, wherever, they have 24 hours time through the correspondent banking system to get the money back. 0 seconds?
So the Bybit example is fascinating because it is almost the 0.3 of the DORA requirements. It's third party, because remember what happened in the case of Bybit, it was the credential of an engineer of Safe on AWS, which was stolen in the first place. This is what happened. So they prepared that, I would say, that mastermind hacking months and months ago. So if you really apply this kind of diligence, if you really assess very precisely in that case your third party, and also if you have an understanding of the processes they were doing in that case, for instance, they were doing blind multi-sig. That was part of the risk. So you had all those components in one go. So I would claim that if you have the proper management system, but again, you need to be helped to create that management system, you are able to prevent Bybit from happening.
Right. And we have that 0 second risk, but maybe thinking a bit farther ahead, when more and more banking happens in a Web3 infrastructure, could there also be a possibility that banking can become more secure than it is today?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, if you think about blockchain, DLT, that was the idea. The idea was to make a transaction being immutable. So the idea remains the same. And if you remember also Bitcoin as an example, I do remember in 2019, you were referring 2019, to reverse the consensus on Bitcoin, you needed to invest in $4 billion of hardware, so 2019. So I would claim that to some level, that infrastructure is more secure. I would still say that the junction between the different components of your perimeters, Web 3 and Web 2, are really the critical point. So typically, oracles are very critical bridges between chains, and you will have plenty of bridges when you go into that blended environment, are very high level of vulnerability that you can have in your infrastructure. But again, it needs a lot of, I would say, again, secure by design approach to be able to get everything under control, DORA or no DORA.
We spoke about banks, we speak about frameworks applicable to banks. Now you mentioned oracles and maybe in general smart contracts, crypto protocols. Do you guys with Halborn also work with the crypto native side of things?
Yeah, so we come from the crypto native. The company was established by a guy who is honestly a genius in cybersecurity who comes from the Web 2. But then the company was more focused on smart contract audit, those kind of very specific Web 3 assessment. And then more and more we had banks in the United States. So we have many of the largest banks in the United States who became customer of us because of that. So we have been expanding from a Web 3 base to the rest of the financial services universe. Some fintech as well in the traditional space. So it's an interesting journey from that standpoint. And we are bridging those gaps and we are bringing that knowledge to combine it with our focus, which is financial services.
When we look at the Swiss ecosystem, and we have many Swiss banks here, but we also have international European banks here. Last year, I took the pulse of 20 Swiss banks and we released a pulse survey, blockchain banking, where I asked, what is your strategy for blockchain? And do you have a strategy? Are you at least working on a strategy? And more than 60% of all banks were eager to do something crypto, even more than 80% of banks in blockchain generally. But when we drilled deeper into this, I found that there were clearly a segmentation in two groups. One of the group was actively working on the strategy and not just thinking about it. They were either already live with a blockchain offering or close to going live. They might be live by now. And there was a long gap of banks just thinking about it. They might not go live this year in Switzerland. When we reflect with your client base and your experience in the market, do you see a similar wave? How do you see banks and traditional financial services go into crypto now?
Yeah, you have always kind of forerunners and the laggards. That's really true, and we can see that with our customers. But I would say that some changes that happen in the legislation, for instance, in the United States, which means that, for instance, when you are custodian of a crypto asset, you don't need anymore to have them on your balance sheet, is accelerating the adoption and accelerating the willingness of banking institutions to go into the custodian space. And that's really where the risk starts to hit. That's where, when you make that move and you start to make custody of a digitized asset or of crypto yourself, because you can do that, it's not anymore on your balance sheet, you really need to double down on that secure by design. You really need to have a custodian approach which is secure by design, but also DevSecOps, you know, from IT. You remember the DevSecOps, the sec part is extremely important. It's more important on chain than anywhere else. So that's really the call to action for the banks. And yes, they do that, but security, of course, I'm speaking for my shop, but I think it's quite obvious. Cybersecurity cannot be an afterthought because a blockchain, it's all about security. And that's the key element of the thinking in our view at Halborn.
When we stay at security and don't go too much into regulatory or other things, but stay with security, what are like some of the big unlocks that might come that will make it easy for more banks, for more traditional financial services to move on chain?
So, for instance, we are developing an AI-based, of course, buzzwords, an AI-based system which will, when you have a smart contract, which is key in everything which is DeFi, key for market makers, for all those community of players in decentralized finance, we are developing an AI tool which will do first quality assessment, so the QA, and the testing, the functional testing, before we go into the vulnerability. So what I'm saying here is that we have, when we work together with our customers, we have really the means to put some element of automation and of industrialization of the processes and of the security in the core processes of the bank. So it will become part of their core banking system. In one of the panels, they were speaking about core banking system. It will become, but again, we need to put those kind of guardrails in place to make that happen.
Thank you, Jacques. I'm excited about the future. There's lots more things to get onto and into the banks. What I would encourage all of you is, now that we need to wrap up, hit us up after the event. The next couple presentations are also going to be very interesting, so stay here. But afterwards, we'll share a few drinks and we'll be available for chatting. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.